I'll call the meeting to order and ask for a motion on the agenda.
I move to accept the agenda.
I'll second.
I should have said first, I do want to make one change and report on the planning commission hearing on the new design review regs.
We can do that at the end, just before adjournment.
Do it at the end, yeah.
Yeah. So with that amendment, still good?
Yes, yes.
And let's go around, introduce yourselves, please.
Martha Smirsky.
Liz Pritchett.
Meredith Crandall, staff.
Eric Gilbertson, chair for the evening.
Benjamin Cheney.
Hannah Smith.
Okay, 159 State Street.
Just a reminder to pull the microphone close and talk into it.
Yana Wilder, I'm here for Court Street Associates.
Describe.
Oh, okay. So we're applying to take down a structure in the back. It's an auxiliary structure that's a garden shed, I think. Used to be a garden shed. And it's falling down, so we're hoping to take it down.
I stopped in there and looked at it the other day.
Oh,
It was-
nice.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of snow. I couldn't really get it, but I could see that it was in really bad shape. I mean, the photographs show that. Ew.
I went and looked at it. It's done. It was a neat little garden house, so it really was a garden house, not a guest house. But it's really nice. It has windows and nice shelves and a nice place to put your equipment.
Oh, I didn't go
Set-
that close. You
Yeah.
really got in there, yeah.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in it. It was a beautiful little building.
Oh.
It makes me quite sad to see it in its
Oh.
current
Were
condition.
you
but
like part of like making snowboards in there or something?
yeah.
Okay. Well, there's a poster in there I'm going to save for you.
Yes, I know the poster you're talking about.
Okay.
I don't need it, but it's,
Okay, good.
but thank you. Yes, that was Andrew Clack's younger brother, Paul.
Nice.
Do you know what the is going to happen with those materials when it gets?
I think that most materials are done because it's kind of in the shade of the trees and it's wet, and I don't think any of the materials are salvageable.
When do you think it's going to be?
At some point in the spring.
It's going to wait till spring.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Because I think a lot of that tongue and groove fur that's on the inside is probably salvageable parts of it. I mean,
Yeah, we'll take a look. I think it's mold and it's probably not very usable.
yeah.
Now, this is a little bit different than most of our applications.
Yeah.
So,
Yana,
do we still need to go through the criteria?
Do you live there?
I think it can
Yeah,
be
there's-
pretty
and
much
there's two,
all
yeah.
not applicable for most of it. I mean, it doesn't really fit with the way we've got this, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, you can probably do a, pretty much not applicable for all the criteria, and,
without reading them off real quick, and somebody stopped me. Preservation or reconstruction of appropriate historic style. That's not applicable. Harmony of exterior design. Again, not applicable. Compatibility of proposed exterior materials, not applicable. Compatibility of the proposed landscaping with the district, not applicable. Prevention of the use of incompatible designs, not applicable. Location and appearance of all utilities, not applicable. Recognition of and respect for view corridors, not applicable. I'm just gonna put a note that several members of the design review committee had looked at the building and it is in terrible condition.
I think that's great. And, I mean, Yana and I have already talked that when and if they're ready to build something else there, they know it has to come back before the design review committee. But you weren't really in the space to figure out what you wanna do there yet.
Trying to figure out what's needed.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the
If
best
you're gonna have a
use.
garden, you could build another
A
garden.
garden.
Do you spend much time in that building?
Yep. It's offices now, single
I
offices.
mean, it's been offices for a long time.
But I think actually something like the use that it was used for like fabrication, like building snowboards, or I've had people come and ask me about building canoes. So something that's like a heated space for
Mhm.
that kind of people as a workshop, I think is what's
Mm.
needed in Montpelier.
I'd like to have that in my backyard. Not the way it is, but, all in favor of approving the demolition? Opposed? So the date's the 3rd today, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It is.
In the upstairs corner office, it faces sort of downstream where the beams and the ceiling is
It's,
above the
at
beams.
bottom there.
The what? What's above?
The ceiling that is above the beams
Mhm.
in that office. I redid that ceiling when the ceiling let go from all those beams, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
was just like a mess across the desks.
You used to use that?
That was Dick Sodek's office, which was above my father.
And they actually those guys, there was solar guys there, their company, and they all of a sudden had exposed beams in their office. It was really nice after they were done.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Thank you, Yana. Thanks.
All set?
All set?
Thank you.
Okay. The next one is 100 State Street, awning proposal.
Awning/sign, really. It's the redo, a revision to the one you guys saw not that long ago.
Okay.
Yes, Roger
Okay.
Samuel from Samuel Sign Company, representing Northfield Savings Bank. If you recall, you guys approved a canvas awning for the 100 State Street a couple of months ago. When the awning finally went up, Tom Levitt, the president of Northfield Savings Bank, said, "I hate it." So they asked us to come up with a, what he doesn't like is the fabric, the loose, wrinkly looking of the banner material itself. So what we're proposing is to replace the banner material with this rigid substrate material that we have used on the College Street branch, and then apply to that PVC lettering, which this is an example of from one of their projects. So it'd be white lettering, and then the logo is this gold. Tom likes to call it gold. Looks yellow to me, but I'm just a sign guy. And so combination of that. So all we're looking to do, oh, and the other thing is the landlord didn't like the fact that the banners went across the brick columns. So
Okay.
he's asking that we put a space between the panels so that the brick is exposed as well. So essentially the same footprint, the same size logo that's on there now, just replacing it with the rigid materials. And we will, we will use the existing frame structure that the banner company installed to apply the panels to.
The smallest radius on your CNC is a 1/4 inch that gets in there. Like to make that a tighter.
Correct.
Any questions or comments?
What is your timeline for doing this?
So we would be looking at installing it in March, middle to end of March. There's a 4-week lead time on material. Tom, I think they were gonna complete the awning and leave that in place until we can take the banner off and then replace it with the panels.
Okay.
Are you doing the rigid stuff on the hood above the door? too?
We are, yes.
Is this a lettering change, the F and the I in field?
No, it should be the same as it was.
Is the font different?
No, it's the same logo.
Oh, I was just looking at this one and then this. It's a different font, that's all.
Yeah, so when they did the rebrand from
Right.
the blue logo, there was a font change at that point.
And that's, the font change there was something that got approved the last.
I just included it in this application so that everything was together.
It's nice, I like it.
Logo changes keep the sign people in business, right?
Yes, it does. And to be honest, I hated that pig logo, but a lot of people in Central Vermont love it, so.
The pig logo.
The pig logo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't really got it.
No.
And if the awning is being interrupted by these columns on this side, why is it not being interrupted there?
We could do that. They only asked for it to be done on State Street, the landlord.
Because it's, I mean, it doesn't read in this photograph, but I bet that column's also interrupted.
Correct,
Right, just the angle doesn't.
correct. Yeah, so the facade panels that go over that entranceway dead end to the side of the brick
I don't know, it seems to me,
for consistency.
for consistency, if you're already doing it, why not expose that brick column also?
We absolutely can, yeah.
Well, you don't expose it on the front where it says Northfield though.
Right, he said that would be fine because the logo was going across there to leave that solid.
And it's
so.
got it's got a rhythm.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It doesn't bother me on the side, the way it is, but I see what you're saying.
I would interrupt it given the choice,
Mhm.
but it's not mine.
Yeah, trying to.
That's a design review thing. That's a, just, I mean, we had the whole debate last time about whether those were architectural features or not, so,
Mhm.
Right, and I feel like we're now calling them architectural features by
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
by calling them out.
calling them out, so we
Mhm.
should treat them consistently
Yep.
is how I
Yep.
feel about it.
I would agree. I think that's a good call. And
So-
last time you asked for the larger picture of the entire building, so I think that puts it in context,
Yeah.
better context as well.
So we're gonna expose the State Street side as well, right?
No, I think
The
we leave
parking
the,
lot side?
the parking
Oh,
lot
I
side.
see, I see what you're talking.
Well, we'll leave this one because it gives nice space for their logo and lettering. Let that one be covered.
Yeah, I don't,
I think that's a good suggestion.
Yep.
okay. Signs have special set of criteria. Preservation or reconstruction of the appropriate historic style if the proposed project involves an historic district or an historic structure. I think that's not applicable for this one. Harmony of exterior design with other properties in the district. I would say that's acceptable. Compatibility of proposed exterior materials with other properties in the district, that's acceptable. Compatibility of the proposed landscaping, there is no landscaping. Prevention of the use of incompatible designs, buildings, color schemes, it's acceptable. Location of all utilities, you're not doing any lights or anything?
No, no lighting.
Okay. Recognition of and respect for view corridors and significant vistas. I think that's acceptable. Conformance with cityscape placement and design recommendations. Acceptable. Compatibility with subject property and adjacent properties. That's acceptable. Shall not obscure significant architectural details. That's acceptable with the exposure. Illumination, internally lit plastic signs, not applicable. Pennants and banners are prohibited, not applicable. Individual letters affixed or painted or engraved directly on the building or structure are encouraged. Acceptable. Okay, but we're gonna expose the, we're not gonna change any of the pillar exposures, right?
Oh, the,
On the parking
on the
lot
parking
side.
lot side, expose, what, one more brick column on the parking lot side?
Yeah. Parking lot side, the probably,
Adjustment is,
what would that be, the
Center
southerly
column.
most banner?
expose center
We have it
column of
labeled
the
as
right.
A, column, yes.
Yeah, the
Column.
west side,
Column in the middle of awning A.
Awning A.
awning A.
Yep.
I kind of prefer it the way it is, but seems cleaner to me, but.
Okay, that was kind of the original intent, and then when it came back, it's like, oh, I missed that the first time.
And that was the landlord versus the
Right,
president. So a
Okay,
couple of different tweaks.
yeah. Got a lot of hands in the pot here.
All in favor of this?
Well, I'll vote for it, but overall.
You still need to sign.
Well, don't worry about the sign stuff too much. Okay. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much.
We'll
Thank
get
you for
the
your time.
New
Yeah,
permit
thank you.
out to you soon,
Okay.
in
That's
the
good.
next couple days.
Very good, thank you.
Thanks, Roger.
Informal review.
Yeah, so we can
So you
do
got some-
minutes first if you want, or
Yeah.
we've got the minutes on here. And we actually have enough people. You and Hannah and Martha.
You have enough? Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
we're just gonna do minute review first, but you can take a seat.
Do I hear a motion on approving the January 21st minutes?
So moved. I second it.
All in favor?
I'm assuming you put your hand up. Awesome. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for your time, everybody. My name's Javier Jimenez, and I'm one of the owners of Bookspieler Records on Langdon Street. And
Just
yes,
pull it closer.
test. Want me to repeat everything?
No.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you again for everybody's time, and thank you, Meredith, for setting this up. And I'm essentially, the reason I'm here today is my partner and I are looking for some guidance on our support structure that is holding our sign. And it's a very old sign that is currently there, depicted on, well, all the images that show it now, that's what we have. And
The second page is really the best.
Yeah.
the superimposed sign that you see there, that's what's accepted in dimension, and but it's come to my attention that the apparatus, the support structure, I think it's somewhere a little too extended, about 6 inches. So I think thought was if the sign moved in, basically you can adjust the sign off the hardware, and that could be compliant where it sits, but the support structure itself, the end pit where the chains meet comes to me, from the way I measured it, about 6 inches shy of the curb, and it sounds like
Well, there's that, but it's
Alright,
only supposed to stick out 3 feet from the building.
the sign. Oh, the holes.
The support structure.
Oh, I thought it was just the sign has to be out.
Well, I mean,
3
that's the
feet.
thing, like, the sign and the support structure are only supposed to go out 3 feet from the building, as well as be 6, you can have,
3
be
feet
within
out.
6 inches of the curb, because some sidewalks are really narrow, and some buildings, and some aren't.
So,
Oh,
that was
so,
unclear.
so there's room to move the sign in, but not the support structure, but when I was looking at it, if you go, I pulled in the one on the last page, and it didn't print really well, but you can see how there's chains anchored into the historic brick in 3 different places, plus the post. And I started getting nervous about recommending that he take those out without having him come before you, and trying to get some guidance on, do you all think it's possible to cut down that post and reattach the chains, or would even that be damaging? I'm trying to, I don't
What
know.
kind of condition are the posts and chains in? I mean, they've been up there for a long time,
They have.
40 years.
Yeah, and we've had various different like maintenance crews from Doug Nettie
Yeah.
bought the building a few years back, and so the building has seen lots of renovations, and nobody red flagged anything about the hardware and their apparatus there. It seems solid as a rock to me. Yeah, the only thing that seems to ever budge is actually this big, huge panel of a sign that's been residing there, I think maybe since the 90s or
It
something.
moves in the wind.
It moves in the wind a bit,
I think structurally you could probably shorten the pole and just hook the chains in the same places.
Yeah, leave the chains hooked and just shorten them and
Yeah,
attach
just
them to the
shorten
end of
them
the
up and
post. Cause that
Attach
was,
them.
I was
Just relink
hoping that was something that you thought would be doable,
So like,
and acceptable, and then we can bring the whole application
Yeah.
back to review the sign as a whole. I just didn't
Right.
wanna have him invest a bunch of money in that if it was something else that, if he felt it needed a completely different support structure.
Is that support structure grandfathered in or anything?
There's a couple of different ways to read the regulations about once you change the sign, if you have to also change the support structure. And that's another reason I'm looking for your guidance as to what would be acceptable to you all.
It looks to me like you could just move the sign in to it, where it could be on the current
Yeah,
structure.
And then cut the post off, so it's
Right.
no more than 3 feet long? Is it not supposed to extend more than 3
It
feet?
kinda depends on, I mean, it's gonna be a pretty big job to change the post, and, I mean, if you're gonna saw it off and take the chains down, I'd put new stuff up.
I think it could all be done in place. I don't think it's a big deal to shorten that post and weld on a new little tab
Right.
that those chains would attach to
It's-
without taking anything down.
As long as that's, the chains and the posts and everything are in reasonable condition.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
chains are easy to replace. It's the attachment that's into
Yeah.
the brick that you don't want to start messing around
Right.
with.
And that's what I was, and I didn't think if we have, we asked him to take it all out, that there was any way to hide that there was something there. There's 4 different places in the brick.
I would just, new chains and cut it off. They can, I think the angles are still good if they're using the same fastenings on the building. Do you think so, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, as far as supporting that sort of
Yeah,
projection, I think you can shorten those hypotenuses, no problem. And, I mean, I would want to look at the plates on the building, but my guess is it's fine to shorten that thing.
been there, what,
Is it-
37 years?
Is it possible to just give it a waiver, the way it is? I think that sort of gets to your grandfathering it in question. I would rather do that than to make them move anything on the brick.
Well, right,
Yeah.
and that's the whole idea of cutting it down. Like, if
Yeah.
you don't want them to move stuff on the brick, if he can get it cut down, then I would approve that. And if for some reason somebody couldn't cut it and make it shorter, if you don't wanna move it on the brick, then I'm not gonna make you move it on the brick.
I can't
That's
see
one reason I'm
why
coming
you'd
here.
have
I
to
know.
move it
I
on the brick.
understand.
Actually,
Yeah.
it would be because it's a better angle, it would be a stronger support than it is now. Yeah, so you could shorten that up without messing with the brick at all.
Awesome.
Unless somehow the fasteners in the brick are shot and they need to be replaced, but if they're put in the same spot,
I mean, they could be put back in the same hole with some sort of epoxy, and they would
yeah.
be fine, would be my guess. Does this sign, I don't know, are we talking about the sign also, or are we not done with the structure?
I mean,
Um,
he'll be, I guess it's up to you. If you want some preliminary feedback, none of this is official, or if you just wanna wait till you come in with your official
I
application.
think I would wait till that, but my one question would be for the table, I suppose, is, I feel out of my depth with, professionals in the sense that I know a welder, but I don't know if he has the skill set or capacity to, or even like jobs on ladders, or do I need like an electrical company that has a chair, or, I don't know exactly how to get to the top point of where the highest chain link hits to do, I don't have a ladder that tall.
Yeah, people have ladders that tall, that shouldn't be
Sure.
an issue.
I guess I just was wondering, but for welding and for cutting pipe, and adhering a new joinery, I guess I would wonder if anybody knows anybody, or,
I know a lot about it.
I guess, yeah, like, how would I go about such a thing, maybe?
As far as shortening the pipe is pretty easy to do with just a grinder and a cutoff
Sure,
wheel.
I'm familiar with cutting the pipe, but
And
after
then-
that part.
Yeah, and then you would just take a piece of angle with some holes in it, appropriately sized for your cable, and then just weld that to that piece of pipe, assuming it's still fine, which my guess is it would be. And I would probably do that off a cube of staging or something like that just kind of made people walk around and, kind
The
of take
back
that.
of a step ladder in the back of a pickup truck.
That's what I told my partner.
Yeah.
Like, give me the pickup and the ladder.
No, I think you would want to use a cube of staging, which is easy to get.
Yeah, and you'd be, blocking the sidewalk, so we would need to just run that by Department of Public Works probably. Because you'd be blocking the public access through there.
That really does stick out a lot, but I don't really have any problem with that.
Yeah, it's
It's
just
been there for 37 years, that's
Yeah.
what we're not talking about the sign, but I like your new sign. It's
Thanks.
really visible.
That's what I want. Yeah.
Is it smaller because of regulations?
Yep.
Yeah.
Once if they wanted to keep the old dimensions, the only option was to like paint over it, but it's dimensional.
Yeah, it's dimensional.
And so there wasn't a way to do that and get the new logo design.
So this is as big as they can make it based
Yep.
on our rules.
for projecting signs.
Yeah, George,
That's too
or
bad.
the designer said it was 60%.
Smaller.
Smaller.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great deal smaller. But I think with the, like if you look on the third page, the picture, like I think the yellow is gonna stand out a lot more, especially in the shade against the brick building.
That's always in the shade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it probably will help it proportionately if you bring it closer to the building. Like right now,
Mhm.
it feels kind of small and wimpy on that big projection out there.
Yeah, but I think brought in and that bright from the sidewalk.
Yeah, and I would consider, talk to whoever your contractor is. See if it's just easier to replace the whole, replace the pole and the chains. I mean, like it's been there over almost 40 years and.
Yeah, I don't know what the housing was like in '73 or the amount, but I feel like I know there's another sign in the basement. It's not that one.
Really?
Is it- yeah.
Yeah, and it's like yellow and black actually, with a lot of like metal and wood together. It's very heavy. So I'm thinking if this apparatus was holding that sign, this support structure is totally overkill for our blade sign we're getting fabricated.
Out of foam.
It'll hold tons what we're doing. But yeah, I mean, I thought it would sit, if it was just, it moved centered in, it would feel right in the center of the sidewalk and hug the building better, and all that visually would look good. But then you'd probably see like a good foot of pipe on the outside of the record,
Uh-huh.
which is, I could live with it. I don't know if it's like formal or if, I don't know. I think I agree that the support structure being smaller will be sharp. I think
Yeah.
it would also be fine if we did nothing to the support structure and just move the sign in.
I would bet nobody's taken a close look at that, how rusty that pipe is.
Yeah, like real close. It's probably
Yeah.
not been done.
Well, it's hard to get at.
Yeah.
You good?
Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for your time, everybody. Appreciate it.
Excuse me. I haven't been to China, so I don't have we met, I can't remember, the planning commission was a week ago Monday.
A week ago today, so
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, planning commission was a week ago.
To talk about the new design review regs. They'd reviewed them, they made some suggestions and changes.
And they had the big public,
Public hearing, some people showed up that just don't like regulations, which I'm surprised more didn't. There were only, like 5 people that spoke?
Yeah, I think there were 5 people that spoke, maybe a dozen that showed up, if that.
Yeah, some didn't say anything. And they made some changes in the boundaries they're really focused on being consistent within the neighborhoods that have been designated in the community. You have to look at a map. There's 30 neighborhoods.
I think so. Well, I mean, these are all each zoning district is divided up into little subcategory neighborhoods, to help, in large part to help with conditional use review when you're doing character of the neighborhood comparisons. And so they really they walked around and tried to survey and figure out what actually fits together as a neighborhood. And so when they redid the design review boundary, they were trying to match it to those neighborhoods for consistency so that an entire neighborhood is treated the same way.
Sure.
I met with them probably a month ago, and we made some suggestions about, first, my house was left out, and I want my house in design review. And it didn't make any sense to leave it out.
Yeah.
It's all part of the National Register District and everything, and this goes outside the district a little bit, so it's a different boundary. I think the only major thing that came up was solar panels. And the regs on solar panels are really written to deal with rooftop installations on flat roof buildings. And if the way you read it, you could not install solar panels on the front face of just a gable roof building. And I have very mixed feelings about that, but I'd like anybody's suggestions, because we're gonna meet again
Monday. Although I may not make it to that one.
Okay.
Mike felt that the planning commission, had a few things to maybe tweak, but didn't feel like that the public comments were too negative. In general, they weren't too negative, so I wouldn't be surprised if the planning commission makes a couple of tweaks and then votes it forward to city council next week.
That was the sort of the design issue that
Yeah.
came up for me is, do we approve solar panels on the front-facing
Facade, whatever.
roof? The way it's written now, you really can't.
Yeah.
On any building.
Yeah,
House
the
or
new,
commercial or-
so if it's a flat roof, it's exempt from zoning
You're right.
altogether. Once you have a pitched roof, it's limited zoning review, and it's really just if it's in design review. But the new regulations really make it really hard, because it says that you shouldn't be able to see the mechanical equipment on the roof. You can't do that with solar panels on a pitched roof.
Right.
Right.
Most mechanical equipment is gonna go on a flat roof, that's what that language was designed for, but then the
Right.
question, somebody brought up the question of, well, what about solar panels on my, historic home?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was like, oh.
And that kind of came up in the context of, are you guys gonna treat energy conservation matters any different? And I thought it was a good discussion, and I have a bit of a conflict, because I'm thinking about putting solar panels on my roof, which doesn't face the street, but you can sure see it during the winter. You can't see it during the summer. But
is the mechanical equipment usually like air conditioning units?
That's usually
Yeah.
what it's talking about.
So
And so
could
it's almost like whether or not there needs to be some sort of sub-clause in there about solar panels on roofs still needing to go through design review, but not being barred
Right.
from being seen.
I would hope we'd allow them.
If
The structure can support a
Right.
solar panel,
I mean,
which
that's-
some of them can't.
right, and
They're
that
historic
goes, they have
buildings.
to go through a building permit still.
Yeah.
The one thing, I was talking about this with the planning director, Mike Miller, and one of the things that he brought up, he's like, well, if they have a historic slate roof, we might not allow it. Are we gonna allow them to
even-
tear up a historic slate roof to install solar panels?
Right.
So he doesn't feel necessarily comfortable just giving a blanket allowance and exempting it from design review or anything like that. But
Well, you wouldn't be exempt, right? You'd have to come back. Or you'd have to come
yeah,
to design
you'd
review.
have to
if it
come to
were
design
a
review
that's
still.
change.
Yeah.
And I think that's, but I think having a blanket statement that says you can't see these rooftop installations from neighboring houses, I don't have the language with me, but there was this language in there where you're like, well, that's just not gonna work
It's
with
like
solar
from
panels.
street views and things
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
sort of
street
said. And I'm just dealing with, part of my work is dealing with installing solar panels on a slate roof. It's really difficult. And it's also, makes maintenance impossible. And so that it's really not practical to do it.
Yeah.
Seems like it would be really expensive. It would be expensive, wouldn't it?
Be expensive, yeah. I mean, you'd have to take the slate roof off, put on a new. The easiest thing to install them on is standing seam roof,
Yeah.
because you can just clamp onto the seams, I guess. But any suggestion for language, I think would be useful. And I just want to get people's feeling about it, because I guess next week we sit
Yeah.
down and talk about it.
They don't come, I mean, solar panels come in, some are gray and some are black, right?
Yeah.
But they don't really come in colors that would match the roof color
No,
necessarily.
I mean, you're going to get a series of shiny
Uh-huh.
surfaces, even if
Right.
the color was the same. You really don't see the sides of the panels.
Yeah.
I mean, I look from a preservation point of view. It's reversible, but would it ever be really reversed? I don't know.
Yeah.
But if somebody 100 years from now all of a sudden decides it's a really important house to decide to take the panels off.
Yeah, I think if it comes before review, then that's a good thing. I know I looked at them for my house and they would be right on the front, and I decided I didn't want to do it. I don't use a lot of electricity anyway, so, but.
I mean, this is a sub-issue to all of those, but any efforts to try to keep them as rectilinear versus like the cutouts for various vents, and then they get kind of like asymmetrically patched onto a roof, I think, especially in a very visual spot.
Mm-hmm.
But if they can be kind of held as a block, that
Yes.
would be ideal.
One house I looked at over in Burlington had the panels all over on one side of the roof. As a new house, but it looked kind of funny, just to not have it regular and balanced.
Yeah.
I don't really understand why they didn't put panels on the whole roof as long as they're doing it.
Good example of what, like, Caledonia Spirits, they have one vent that sticks out, and so there's like this one indentation
Yeah.
that seems like that from a new building could have been avoided to just keep those things a perfect rectangle. But
I gather the consensus is we figure out a way to approve them in most circumstances.
It's kind of a case by case, I think, isn't it? for-
And we can put in there, say it's destructive of historic materials dealing with the slate roof.
Well, but I think making sure that we don't have I'll work with Mike, and he can also, I mean, this is all being
Yeah.
recorded, he can look at this discussion, and I can report to him about it too. That I think that there's definitely a way to make sure that there's language in there linked to that utilities on the roof to be clear about how, the solar panels on roof, it's not something that's barred, but it needs to go through design review.
And it can't be destructive of historic materials.
Yep.
I think that's good, yeah.
That would save the slate roof. It's gonna make some people mad, but all regulations make some people mad.
Right.
Awesome,
Okay,
thank you.
do I hear a motion to adjourn, or is there any other business anybody wants to talk about?
Just wanted to thank you for all the work you've done on those regulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, I've had a lot of help.
Yeah, and the committee too.
And it's, Meredith is great, Mike has been helpful, certainly the people on the Historic Preservation Commission have people put a lot of effort in it.
I know.
And I think they're good. I hadn't read them for a couple of months, and I did before the hearing, and my impression was that they made a lot of sense, that they were easy enough. People complained they were too long, but then they complained if they're not long enough, they complain that they're too vague.
Uh-huh, yeah, I read through them too a while back, and I thought,
Yeah,
good job.
they're workable, thank you.
Mhm.
Well, and very few applicants will actually be dealing with all of them.
Yeah,
They come to us with the project and we'll say, okay, these are the like 7, 8 things you need to worry about.
and Mike made a really good point that, you know, the staff, Meredith, will help you through these and decide which pieces of this really apply to your project. Because they are long, they're what, 13 pages?
15.
15 pages, so they're long, but,
Yeah. Well, at least now we can say, okay, these sections apply to you, and look, there's actually things in here to tell you what you can and can't do.
That's good, yes, it helps you.
and
Yeah.
the, next part of the Preservation Commission is to do some guiding brochures and handouts and stuff like that.
New
I'm-
streetscapes.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
those are old.
If-
Those are so old.
I'll be so glad when somebody goes, we're done with that. Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Everybody can go home, get depressed, and watch the news.
Oh, gosh.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Yeah. Wake me up, thanks.